Hey Sean, thanks for taking some time to talk to me. I want to talk about, first of all, about the album The Turning Point, which has been released by the Exiles. First of all, can you tell me how you and Paul got together originally?
Yeah. Hi, Nigel. Well, thanks for having me on. Paul and I got together in the early 90s. It was a friend of ours, actually, a mutual friend in Hollywood, California, John Sutherland, who was a big fan, a big European music fan or English blues music fan. And he knew of my background and he knew of Paul's voice. And he thought it would be a really good pairing. So he was the one that actually brought us together initially.
Okay. The name The Exiles was initially used as when the band formed in the early 90s, but by the time the album was released in 96, The Exiles had actually become the album name. And it was released actually under the name Sean Manning and Paul Rafferty. Um, what was the reason for that?
Well, when we originally put it out, it didn't come out as a band per se because it was a number of demos. It wasn't a finalized piece. It hadn't really been completely fully mastered. And at that point in time, we had a number of different drummers and bass players in the rhythm section that were contributing to the material. So it wasn't really until this last year when I had an opportunity to go into the studio and master everything and make it a cohesive project to release it under the band name.
Big names involved in the original project: Neil Girardo, Pat Benatar fame, and Marilyn Grobacker from Pat Benatar Band, and Greg Delange from White Lion. Who else was involved initially at that stage?
Well, back then we had Terry Mascal from the UK. He was a young English drummer who we flew over, and an English bass player who was living out in Hollywood, California, by the name of Paul Andrew Stanley. And then I brought in Jeff Jacobs from Foreigner and Billy Joel to put keyboards on it on the final product this last year.
And that 1996 release, was that only in the US, or was that? What was the what was it? Was that just
Yeah,
released in?
it wasn't really a release, to be honest with you. It happened right around the time of grunge, and so there was probably 1,000 CDs that were printed up. There was no record company behind it per se. There was no marketing. There was no publicity. Nobody really knew that it came out. So for all intents and purposes, this is a brand new release, but we had to call it a re-release because a product had been at least made before.
Okay. You said that probably came out at the wrong time for it's a great album, but it probably just came out at the wrong time musically. Because obviously grunge was the kind of the rock scene at the time, so just probably great album, wrong time for it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, stylistically, we'd just gone through everything in the mid '80s to the big hair bands to the late '80s, and it was getting a little bit ridiculous. And at that point in time, the industry needed to change, and grunge happened, which was the equivalent of the UK punk scene happening in the '70s to change it. And so, stylistically, the music at that time, because the record industry at the time a little bit different now, but they were the ones that actually that controlled what the population was going to hear. So it was the business guys that made that determination.
And coming forward to the present day, what kind of spurred the decision to do to redo the album and re-release it?
I got a phone call from a friend of mine in Switzerland, Chris, who'd been on the scene in California in the late '80s and early '90s, and he reached out and he'd worked with bands, he'd worked with Leather Wolf and a number of other bands, and he said this music is too good not to hear. There's a company out here that would like to get in contact with you and kind of re-release it. So I said, okay, great. And then they got in contact with me and it afforded me the opportunity not only to re-release the music, but to actually go into the studio here in Dallas um, at Empire Studios and completely remaster everything, add new tracks to everything, re-record a number of things, add backing vocals to it. So it's a completely if you have the original and you have the new version and you play them next to each other, sonically they sound completely different.
Actually, I did look online, and it's quite a rare album CD to find. So there weren't that many copies pressed at the time, so that is quite.
Probably it's probably about honestly, Nigel, it's probably about 150 or 200 out there. That's it of the original version.
And who else was involved in the new version then?
Well, I brought Jeff Jacobs in to, he was a foreigner keyboard player. He's a friend of mine. We played before. He played with Billy Joel too. He added strings for the orchestration that I was hearing in my head, and keyboards, Hammond and Mellotron, B3, piano to all of the tracks.
Yeah.
And then Alex Gerst here at Empire Studios in Dallas, who's the owner of Empire Studios, he's also a drummer as well. So he helped me with some drums on some tracks that were not on the original. So Turning Time, the album Turning Time, which is this product, has 5 more songs on it that were not on the original as well. So there's 5 completely brand new songs on this album.
I was going to play a track from the album now. Do you want to pick a track and maybe tell us something about it? Anyone at all?
Yeah, if you want to play Soul Woman, that's a single that was released actually this last week. That was a song that I had completely forgotten about for 20 years. It was drums, vocals, scratch guitar track, and bass on the Master 2-inch. And that has now had 4 more guitar tracks added to it. It's been mastered. Jeff came in and added to some Hammond to it, put backing vocals on it. So that's a really hard driving. That's a real hard driving rock and blues track.
It is a fantastic track. Yeah. Okay, we'll play that one. And going back a few years, you originally from England, obviously. How did a 21-year-old English guitarist end up playing with Kevin DuBrow and Quiet Riot?
I actually came over when I was about 18. I came over to go to music college in California, and I came over to study jazz. I was studying jazz and fusion a lot in the UK before I left. I was professional in the UK when I was 17, playing in Southampton at the big ballrooms down there. And we were doing 4 nights a week, 3 sets a night, everything from 50s music, 60s music, 70s music, and at that time, 80s, which was top 40 music. I came over to study jazz, and then a really dear friend, good friend of mine, Rowan Robertson, got the gig with Ronnie James Dio. And then because of that, my circle out here changed, and Ronnie and Wendy, both of them were very gracious and offered to help me. I didn't know what I was going to do after completing music college. I was going to go back to London and do session work and that type of thing. And Ronnie said, I'll help you. Do you want to stay here? And I'm like, yeah. So stayed out. And then I think it was through that connection that Kevin heard about me. And that was actually through John Sutherland originally as well. And Kevin was looking specifically for an English guitar player. Because when I first got together with him, he actually called John Sykes had told him, because Whitesnake toured with Quiet Riot in the mid 80s, and John had told him, to get an English guitar player. And Kevin was a huge fan of Humble Pie, Steve Marriott, a huge Humble Pie fan and everything. So he actually called him and said, hey, I've got an English guitar player. So he sat me down on his couch and he said, I want to reform the band. At that point in time, Kevin wasn't in Quiet Riot, the band. Paul Shortino had just finished an album. And funnily enough, right before I got together with Kevin, I did some sessions with Paul Shortino and Sean McNabb in the studio out here as well. So it was probably going to be one or the other. Anyway, so he said he wanted to reform the band because he didn't know what was going on with the name at the time. They were going backwards and forth legally with the rights of the name of the band, him and Frankie. And he said, I want you to be the guitar player. I want to reform the band. Let's start writing songs for it. So we started writing songs together. And we brought in my old bass player from a project, Kenny Hillary. And we auditioned drummers, and we found this just great drummer from New York, Pat Ashby. And to avoid any publicity, we went out under the original Quiet Riot name, which was Little Women. That was the name that Randy had come up with for Quiet Riot originally. So we did that, and we did gigs on the East Coast and the West Coast of the USA to kind of workshop the songs and that type of thing. At that point in time, I had kind of had about as much of it as I was going to take. And I left and ended up joining the band Hurricane out here. I
Yes.
love Kevin. I
Yeah.
love Kevin, and we wrote some great songs together. But musically, stylistically, it wasn't where my heart was at. It wasn't bluesy enough for me. It wasn't really challenging enough. So it was time for me to move on.
I'll probably answer the next question. You did obviously write some tracks with Kevin, which ended up on the Quiet Riot album Terrified in
Yeah.
1993. Do you regret not getting to play on the Quiet Riot material, or do you think it wasn't your thing, so it's not a
No,
regret you
not at
have?
all. No, not at all. I I mean, frankly, I didn't even know who they were when I came to the USA because they weren't big in England at the time. I'd seen them in Kerrang a couple of times, and that was about it. And then I heard over here, the song that they were initially famous for, which was "Come On, Feel the Noise," and I'd already heard Slade, so to me they were nothing more than a cover band, honestly.
Yeah.
And then and you have to remember, I was a musician. I didn't come out to be a rock star or do any of that crap. I was a musician. So when I heard the music and Bang Your Head, Metal Health, it, I was like, okay, I'll play it, but I really didn't have a lot of love for it. Let's just put it that way. I was at that time. I was raised on Rainbow Rising, Black
Yeah.
Sabbath,
Yeah.
Neon Nights, early Coverdale with early Whitesnake. I was raised on real blues and Zeppelin and heavy stuff.
Yeah. You mentioned Hurricane there. After you left Quite Right, you joined Hurricane, working with Kelly Hanson on the album Liquefy, which was released in 2001.
Mm.
What was it like working
Those,
with Kelly
those
on that
those
album?
those were songs that we had written together in the early '90s. So
Really?
what happened was when I left working with Kevin, so Kelly, Jay, and I got together with Tony Cavazzo. They were auditioning guitar players at the time because Doug had just left and I think was doing House of Lords. And they were auditioning guitar players. They were going to try two guitar players initially. So Jeff Young and myself, Jeff from Megadeth, we rehearsed with them together, and then they decided that they wanted one guitar player, and we got on really well in terms of songwriting and stylistically. So we were moving forward with that project, and then and again around that time, I think Jay was doing some work with Unruly Child, and then Kelly and I. So it was just Kelly and I, and then we were looking for a rhythm section. So he called me and he said, Greg and James from White Lion were looking to put a project together because White Lion had split up at the time. So the original version of the Exiles was actually Kelly, myself, Greg, and James from White Lion workshopping some songs. One of the riffs ended up being one of the riffs that I ended up taking for the Exiles project, but and Kelly moved on to prior to working obviously with Mick and Foreigner. He was initially working a little bit with CC DeVille in his solo band,
Yeah.
and then Jay, like I said, Jay had gone off to work with Unruly Child, and then at that point in time, James and Greg were both working with Zach in his band Pride and Glory at the time as well. So it was all kind of coming to an end, and that's when I got in touch with John. He put me in touch with Paul, and Greg was actually our drummer initially for a while. I saw band pictures with Greg in them as a drummer, and Greg actually played drums on the first song that Paul and I wrote together, Rainmaker, which is a really cool, heavy vibe song.
Nice.
Greg D'Angelo is playing drums on that, and he did an incredible job.
Yeah. A great pick too. Um, I thought I'd play something from Liquefy actually a bit later in the show, but if you had to pick a track from Liquefy, which one would you pick?
Um, well, Heart of Stone is a song that Kelly and I wrote together pretty quickly. In My Dreams, we wrote together relatively quickly as well. They were both good, but I ended up. I think I had three songs on there, but played guitar on all of it with them. And they had some incredible songs. Torn is a great song that they have on there. And a number of other songs that I came into the studio and played the guitar on. I didn't write them. That were awesome songs. Actually, yeah, I was quite pleased with the range of work that I was able to do on that album, because they had some really cool vibes going on that. I think if that album had have come out um, either immediately after their Slave to the Thrill album,
Yeah.
or if that album had actually come out instead of the Slave to the Thrill album at that time, because the timing would have been different. Because there's a lot of really good commercially viable songs, heavy
Yeah,
songs
no,
on
it's
that like
a good album.
pre album.
Yeah. So which one would you pick? If you had to pick one to play.
Um, I'd probably pick Heart of Stone
Okay, we'll play
to
that one later
play.
on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll get back to the Exiles. You mentioned the album features five new tracks, and you've mentioned that one's kind of an old track you picked up. But in terms of
Mm.
those five tracks, are they all new, or are they bit of tracks that you've picked up bits of, or what's the story
No,
with the five tracks?
they're all new. So Soul Woman is a brand new track. Ain't No Fool is a brand new track. I'm just looking at the CD here. Feminine Side is a new track. I'm the One and Soul has No Home. So I'm the One is our next going to be our next single. It's very kind of early White Snake Come and Get It vibe. Paul Rogers, Bad Company. But Soul Has No Home is an acoustic track that I had to scratch for, and when I heard it in studio out here in Dallas. So I added vocals, I double vocals, added backing vocals on it, added some more guitar and some rhythm. I love that song. That's very reminiscent of early Rod Stewart, Jeff Beck sort of Faces type of vibe. Very raw. That's a great song. So I do love that song, and it's very unheavy, you know. So the Turning Time album has everything on it from really heavy tracks like Rainmaker,
Yeah.
you know, Richmond Castle Walk, which is very much like a Led Zeppelin Kashmir. It starts off with a mandolin and a folk guitar, and then goes into really really heavy stuff. To Soul Has No Home, and High Old Times is like an old Sam Cooke R&B number. So it really, I will say this, Nigel, I've never really listened to any of my work before. To tell you the truth, I go and I record the album, I do it, and then I go on to the next project. But this album I've been able to listen to, especially with headphones, and the more I listen to it, I actually hear a lot in there. So I'm very grateful of the opportunity to have made it, because it was a closed chapter of something from 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a lot of really good, some great musicians on there. There's some killer musicians on there. Pat Benatar's band, and I mean, yeah. So it's I'm quite pleased with it.
It's a good album. I'll play another track from it now. Again, do you want to pick a track and maybe tell us something about it?
Yeah. I'd actually, if you want something different, Friend. I really like Friend a lot. It starts off just with a solo Telecaster guitar and Paul's voice, and then it kicks in and it's very up tempo. It's very up tempo. It's very feel good, very Faces type of vibe. Yeah, I love the lyrics. Paul wrote it for a friend of his with a debilitating disease, and so yeah, it's got a lot of meaning to it. Friend.
You want to play that one? I mean, am I right in thinking that you totally stepped away from the music scene sort of in the late 90s or thereabouts? Is that right? How's it after Paul, I
Yeah,
think?
yeah. After I did after I did the work with Paul, at that point in time, I knew that the industry was going to be where it's at now.
Yeah.
The music industry now, is nowhere anything close to what it was like in the late 80s,
Yeah.
obviously. And I knew that it was going to end. I was driving through, actually in Beverly Hills with Tom Wally, and Steve Jobs had just been pictured on the front of Rolling Stone magazine, I think it was, holding up an iPod,
Yeah.
the first iPod, or whatever it was that it was called. I think it was an iPod. And I said, that's it, it's done. And Tom was like, no, it'll be fine. I'm like, no, it won't. And at that time, I remember Lars Ulrich from Metallica was fighting the whole Napster thing. And I'm like, there's no way you're going to be able to stop this. Because when we were kids, if we bought an album, and it had a cassette player, you could record it. But the only people that could get it were the people in your village or your town that you could get to on a bus or a bicycle.
Yeah.
That was it. In terms of piracy, it wasn't doing
Yeah.
anything at that
Yeah.
point. Now it's the click of a mouse and it's all over the world. So I knew back then. I was like, from a business perspective. Plus, I'd been professional since I was 17, and I'd seen. I was very lucky to have achieved quite a lot by the time I was, 21 in the music industry and playing with a lot of great musicians, some of which were quite obviously well known. And it was going to be too restrictive for the person that I was going to become.
Yeah.
So I knew I needed something else. And I completely, from a professional perspective, it's all I'd ever known. I've been professional since I was 17, and I was like, I've got to do something else. I needed to do something because it wasn't giving me. I was not going to get into the grunge thing. I was not going to put on a checkered plaid shirt, wear a pair of Doc Martens, and be something that I wasn't. So and I wasn't going to go and play. I played clubs and played jazz and done all of that. And most of the really great jazz players that I knew, a lot of them were like heroin addicts and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Did you maintain any links at all with the scene, or keep in touch with people, or did you just kind of just?
Oh no, totally, totally.
Yeah.
No, I still have my dear friends that I was, that I was playing with. I mean, I spoke to Jay last week from Hurricane. I speak to whenever Foreigner would come to Dallas. I go see Kelly
Yeah.
and Rowan and I have always been close. I mean, he was 17 when I first met him. I was 19. We used to take guitar lessons together in London, and so yeah, my musical friends that I was in professional situations with, a lot of them I'm still friendly. I'm still friendly with, but it's like anything, as you get older, your circles change as your life changes and that type of thing. But I've got great memories with all of them. Paul specifically, he and I were very, very close and wrote some incredible material in a very short period of time. This has been a great opportunity to kind because he lives in the south of France. He's an
He's
incredible
a painter,
artist.
isn't it? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
incredible, absolutely incredible artist. In fact, one of the greatest gifts because he called me about a year ago and he said, look, because Tom Wally had our master tapes from Interscope and Hollywood Records, and he asked Paul if he wanted them. And so Paul called me and he says, Mannering, do we want these master tapes? So I'm like, yeah, send them to me. So when Tom was gracious enough to send them to me, when I opened the 2-inch masters, all of Paul's original lyrics fell out that were handwritten in there on all the studio notes and a lot of his drawings and his doodles. So we'd be in the studio and he'd be writing lyrics and he'd be doodling stuff, because he's an artist. So actually a lot of that art is in the artwork that I put together because I designed all of this and put in the CD as like a 24-page booklet with a lot of Paul's original artwork in there. So that was really kind of cool. I got a chance to tie all of that up.
On Amazon, just to do a plug for you can get it on Amazon UK, I think, can't you? That the CD.
You can, yeah. It's now streaming globally all over the world, and it's available on Amazon, the actual physical CD. And I do encourage people if they if you like Led Zeppelin and you like Bad Company and you like the band Free and any like blues classic rock, that there should be a number of things on here that you'll like because I'm a fan of that music. I love early Whitesnake. Before 87, I love early Whitesnake. My whole life was music. I have every single Kerrang that was ever printed from the first one, every single sound. I was a huge fan. So I'm a fan of that style of music, and you don't hear a ton of it now. So I figured there must be some people out there that like that style of music, that haven't had anything new for a while. So
It's obviously get sent a lot of things by promoters, and when I put that on, it's like first track. Thought, wow, that's fantastic. So I actually played 2 tracks in the show last week too. So
I'm glad you like it, man. And what I recommend people to do as well is, I remember the first time I heard Hysteria, Def Leppard. Initially, I went through and I kind of listened, and I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of hits on here. There's a bunch of hits on here. And I got more into it, and then I heard more of it. But it was very different than the first time that I heard Rainbow Rising. When I heard Rainbow Rising, I got the overall vibe, but the more I listened to it, especially on headphones, the more I actually heard in there, if that makes sense. There's some albums that just knock you over the head immediately.
Yeah.
And then there's like, some of my favorite Zeppelin albums are the songs like the Rain songs that they're not the most commercial initially, but the more you listen to them, the more actually comes out. So I wanted that experience. I'm glad you like when you put Turning Time on too, when you heard that first one, because that originally had no slide guitar on it whatsoever. It had no backing vocals on it. And I really think the slide guitar that I was able to add out here in Dallas really drives it with Myron's drumming and everything. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it when you put it on.
No, it did. And obviously, has re-releasing the album kind of ignited the desire to do any more projects, or will you just sort of sit back again now and let that be there?
Well, I think, I mean, for me, honestly, the most important thing that I was able to actually make the album
Yeah.
that was in my head that I wasn't able to make years ago. And the way that I look at it is I wanted the music to be put out there because there's people, I know there are people that would really appreciate that style of music. I did enjoy the producing process in the big studio here and going through that. I really did enjoy that. I don't have any massive desire to run around on a stage at this point. Who knows what will happen? I'm always open to anything with whatever creatively, wherever creatively things take me. But I did enjoy. I love this style of music, and it really, funnily enough, making this had me go back and listen to a lot of old Zeppelin again on headphones and listening to the Rain song and listening to how organic and soulful those albums were, because there was no AI back then. There was no digitization of everything. It was all vibes. It was all vibes. And we recorded a lot of this album actually in Sunset Sound, the same place where Zeppelin recorded a lot of their stuff, and the Stones and everything. So we wanted to catch that vibe. So we'll see. I'll see wherever he brings me. We'll see.
See where it takes you. So we'll
Yeah.
finish by playing another track from the album, and I'll let you pick another one and tell us something about it.
Yeah. I think let's end with Richmond Castle Walk. Richmond Castle Walk is a very unique 6-7 minute kind of epic of a song. It starts with acoustic guitar and mandolin. Then there's actually low in the mix monk chants that I put in there in the background. Starts off in an English folk vibe, and then it gets really heavy, almost Zeppelin-y heavy, and then ends up with the mandolin and the acoustic again. And it's very unique. It's got strings in there. A big nod of the head to Jimmy Page and Kashmir. So yeah, I hope people like it.
We'll play that one. Again, thanks for taking the time to talk to me, Sean.
Yeah, of course, mate. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the music, So yeah, God bless you.
Good talking to you.